So today I wanted to look at something different. As part of my upskilling journey, I'm going to be starting a new series where I look at 4 elemental models from Loot Studios. We'll look at some different ways of painting them, try out some new mediums, maybe some new techniques, blend them all together. So join me as we have a look today at Fire Elemental. I want to look at incorporating my airbrush. We'll use that for zenithal coat and laying down a base color, get some tones, see how the whole model is going to look, and then we'll look at putting some acrylics on top. And then I've got a new medium I want to try at the end. I think the Loot models we're looking at today are really good to showcase some new techniques. They're not too heavy on the small details. There's not 1,000 pouches, satchels, little belts and chains to do. We can get a good base coat and a good color theme going through it. I'm looking forward to it, and I think we'll have some fun exploring. So we can take it from here, grab my airbrush, and we'll get a zenithal coat down, and we'll see how the model looks. So the model's got an initial coat of Army Painter Matte Black Primer, and now we're attacking it with the Army Painter Matte White Primer. Generally with the zenithal, the light source would come from the top, sort of simulating the sun, but I want this one lit from the bottom. The majority of the light's can be cast from the flames upwards up the model, and up the top near the back of the model will be a little bit darker. Here's where I would normally finish a zenithal coat, but I'm trying to lately take the white a little bit further. That way try and get a bit more saturation and brightness into my models. They've been slightly desaturated lately, and I think that's because I haven't been taking the zenithal prime light enough. So here I'm just trying to get a little bit of white over everything. That'll just bring up those details, get that contrast in, and then just take the tips of the flames that little bit lighter, and that's where my yellow and sort of bright colour is going to be, and then I want that dark look for the stone. So for this step of the process, I'll be using the Army Painter's specifically made airbrush paints. We'll be looking at using Encarmine red as the base. That's for all the deep recesses of the model. Then we'll be looking at some lava orange and Daemonic yellow. You can see that I managed to get the red down into most of the deep recesses, and this will be working as the shadow. And now we're going around with the orange, the lava orange, and this is sort of our mid-tone, so we want to get this spread all around the model. You can see I'm spraying it at a slightly different angle, and this is so I don't cover all of the red that I've attacked from the top, and that's gotten deep down into those cracks, and this gets the orange covering most of the model, and we'll look at highlighting it with the yellow, which will be even less of the model that gets the paint over it. So you can see I've changed the angle that I'm applying the paint with the airbrush. My shadow, I came from the top down. The orange is my mid-tone, is sort of coming straight onto the model at a lot flatter, and then when I get to my highlight, I'll be spraying that from the bottom upwards. This just means that the paint's hitting different parts of the models. It's keeping the deep shadow that I sprayed from the top sort of untouched in those deep recesses, and the orange helps balance everything out. Now we apply some yellow, and you can see I'm angling this slightly from the bottom upwards, just trying to capture all of those edges of the flames. I have to say, the one thing you have to appreciate about the airbrush is how quickly you can get a base coat on a model of colour. I mean, this is 3 different colours with some blends textured in the space of 10 minutes, 20 minutes on the airbrush. The finish with the airbrush is very nice and matte, of course. And from here, it's just a matter of touching things up with acrylics and using some standard paintbrush techniques. So here's the model after its initial airbrushing. It's looking pretty good. I'm already 2 seconds into putting some acrylic on and regretting my choice already. It just looks a little bit jarring, a little bit too opaque. I think I need to add a little bit of water here, dilute it down, and just ease it in, and we'll build it up from there. So now I've added a little bit of water. We're sort of looking at somewhere in between a glaze and layering consistency, probably not quite watered down to a glaze layer. So now it's just a matter of going around with the orange and the yellow. I'm just sort of smathering this on, wet blending as such. I'm not letting each layer dry. And this just gets a bit more coverage, and if anything, I may have taken it a little bit further than I wanted to. So I'm still relying on that base coat underneath to guide where the orange and the yellow needs to go. But at this point, it's just sort of wet blended all together. And I am making a conscious decision to just tone the yellow down a little bit at this stage. So I am focusing a little bit more on the orange around the whole model. So you might argue now that putting the wet coat on top of the airbrush paint job may have detracted from it quite a bit. It's definitely coated over a lot of the airbrushing that I've done. You can see it in the yellows. It's really toned it down with the oranges that I've put in. It has watered down the effect, so to speak. But this next step in the process is where we bring the model back to life by punching in some contrast and using some opaque acrylic. The good thing with having that initial coat down is I haven't had to put paint all over the model, and it does add a little bit of depth, mixing that wet paint onto that airbrush. And now we'll go through and just put on a little bit more opaque coverage with the acrylics, just to highlight and get some of those details through. So with the solid colours basically being done on the model itself, now it's time to pick out those small details, and this really helps to add that contrast into the job and gives us something to contrast against the main colour focus of the model. So I've gone back to the red, and we're just going to touch up all these dark recesses through the stone on this model. Of course, it's had all of the spray from previous coats with the airbrush and our watered down coats, so we'll get that vibrancy back into the shadow. So we're going to work backwards from the red. For the model itself, I've gone from red up to yellow through orange. Now we're going to work backwards down from the red in the deep recesses of the stone, go for a dark stone colour, and then some black as we reach further away from the flames. Should offer some good contrast to the model. So the last remaining steps here are to get some dark stone and matte black down into all of the stone areas on the model. Then I'm going to look at using the new Speedpaint Broadsword Silver Mettalic Speedpaint just to touch up the cages on his hands. And then we're just going to touch up with some mummy robes and green gauss just to add a tiny bit of contrast colour into the model. So sit back and let's have a look, see how this goes. So what I've really been looking forward to is trying this translucent ink. It's something I've seen on a lot of the channels. I haven't had any ink to play with. and I'm quite looking forward to seeing if it can make a bit of a difference to the model. You'll see from the colour scheme I've toned down the yellow all the way through. So let's head to the airbrush. We'll see if it makes a difference or not. I've got my fingers crossed that it's going to make it a bit more vibrant, but wait and see. The orange is overpowering the yellow on some of the highlights. And I did this intentionally hoping that this yellow ink will really bring out the vibrancy to the yellow. So I've played it down a little bit, and hopefully it should tie all of the colours together and just help blend everything in with this one overall coat. I'd be interested to know if any of you use inks with your models at home. If so, drop a comment. Maybe tell everybody how you use the ink. This is definitely something I want to explore further in some upcoming videos. Now that I have some colours to play with, I think I'll definitely try and incorporate it into my painting workflow. So in conclusion, pretty happy with the paint job. Really liked the initial spray coat with the airbrush, laying down those solid colours. It was a really good way of visualising how it was all going to come together right from the start. Ink didn't seem to make as big of a punch as I thought it would, but definitely helped with the vibrancy of the yellow, and did tie it all together. I think I'll experiment with the inks a little bit more. One or two of the other models, I've got some ideas where I might use the ink, so I'm going to try and use them a little bit differently in the next upcoming videos. So if you enjoyed this process and just seeing a bit of a play with some of the techniques and mediums, stay tuned. I'm going to have a few more videos coming with the water, the wind and the earth elementals. And yeah, I've still got a few other mediums and techniques to play with. So hit the subscribe button if you don't want to miss looking at some of these other models from Loot and some of the techniques and mediums we'll have an experiment with. You might just find something that will appeal to you, and if not, you can at least see me have a go, make some mistakes and learn some lessons from there.